great to see everybody. We do have a lot of information to go through, but we're going to try and keep to a pretty strict timeline so we can have questions and go into a little more detail at the end if you'd like. On the call with us today, we have Craig Boroff, who's our board chair. If you want to shake your hand, Craig, and he'll say a few words in a minute. Obviously, I know everybody on the call, and I'm the Teresa Forthover, President and CEO. And then we have Kelly Moreland, our VP of Development, and also Maureen Karolski, our VP of Clinical Services. Maureen took over for Kathy Schrock in the midst of the pandemic when Kathy retired. So she's had quite a launching pad. She's been with us for many years, but was promoted to that position this summer. And then, of course, I think as everybody knows, Kelly was promoted right before the pandemic hit. So she's had trial by fire for sure, but also has been with us for many years. And I said this at our board meeting on Monday night, but we have the most fantastic team to be working with right now. So feel very fortunate to have such a solid team. And then I think we'll have Craig say a few words before we get started.
You bet. So welcome. I'm Craig Boroff. I have the privilege of being the board chair this year. You might recognize that the last name of my parents on the Zoom call, who are significant supporters of Easterseals and my work on the board. My relationship with Easterseals started almost 14 years ago. My daughter is a client there and has been for the last 14 years. I've been on the board for about the last 9 and had the chance to head our development committee, be on our finance committee, our audit committee, and some other roles. So it's a privilege to be with you today and talk about where we are as an organization.
So moving ahead to talk a little bit about our services. So as you may recall, for those of you who were on our last call a couple of months ago, we had to close right before the state closure. We shut our facilities down and reverted to teletherapy exclusively until about May, when we opened back up to in-person services. We have a variety of restrictions and things still in place. So we have limited in-person sessions and are continuing teletherapy. The combination of the two has really enabled us to see more clients because some clients just weren't appropriate for teletherapy. But for those who are, it's been a great opportunity for them. And so it's really worked out well. And really the combination of the two models where somebody might come in person for a couple of sessions and then do a couple of sessions of teletherapy has worked well. This gives you a breakout of our teletherapy and in-person. So about 62% of our families are still using teletherapy, but 37% are now in person, and that number continues to grow slightly each year. The small blue space that you see is in-home. And that's one of the things that is a bit of a challenge for us right now. The idea of a therapist going from home to home to home really doesn't fit our safety standards. It was a little better in the fall when the weather was cooperating. Obviously in the winter, that becomes a challenge, but we hope with the continued vaccinations as well as the hopefully eventually warmer weather, that will continue to improve. Right now, we're seeing about 185 sessions per day between teletherapy and in-person, and that's about 90% of our typical. Our intakes are a little bit lower than normal, and that's really a result of 3 primary things. Fewer doctor's appointments. We're finding that our families are not going to the doctor as often, so referrals from doctors are lower. Schools, with kids not being in school, schools are a primary referral area for us. And then also one of the biggest areas of referrals are word of mouth. And with the lack of socialization and interaction, we're finding that's being impacted as well. And so those, so our referrals are definitely down. However, we're about 85% of our intake goal and target. So it is slowly picking up, and we're feeling more positive as time goes on. One of the things that we did back in June is we did a survey to our families because as therapists and staff, we felt like the teletherapy was going extremely well, but we really wanted to check in with our parents and make sure they felt that it was going well. So back in June, when we first did the survey, 89% of the families said that they were making progress. And then when we did, or I'm sorry, 84% said that they were making progress through teletherapy. And then when we redid the survey again in June, nearly 90% felt that their children were actually making progress through teletherapy. And we're really pleased about that because the challenge between, remote school, remote work, lack of socialization, all of the variety of things that we're all dealing with, we're really pleased that children are still making progress during therapy. That was a wonderful thing for us to share with our therapists and to really acknowledge the work they've been doing. We do have a variety of safety measures limitations, and we recognize that the health and safety guidelines are impacting families, and we have welcomed their feedback. However, that they've been really understanding about the measures we're having to take, which have been really effective in keeping our centers safe. So I'll talk a little bit more about this later on, but to date, we've only had 4 COVID cases in the center with 0 spread. So that's been helping us really maintain the safety and security measures because we know that they're working. We stagger appointments to allow for deep cleaning and sanitation, but cuts down on how many appointments we can actually have in a day. We know therapists and families miss the collaboration with co-treats, and we've tried to be creative. If there's an in-person session and a co-treat can come in electronically through the screen, then they're able to participate in the visit that way. EI, as I said, is allowing in-home visits, but we're really limiting that right now. Once vaccinations and weather improves, like I said, we will increase that.
But this is a great opportunity to kind of pivot to, how are we as an organization faring through these, unprecedented times? And so what you see here is some milestones. We have a fiscal year that starts in September and goes through August. In preparation for that, we do a deep dive budgeting cycle, which traditionally happens in about the 90 days before, so June, July, August. And so you kind of think about that. We came out of the shutdown in the pandemic in the spring. We went into our budgeting cycle and we started our fiscal year in September against all this uncertainty. So we started by looking at those risks and budgeting for a deficit right at $500,000 in September. What we also did is we looked at our ability to recapture revenue over time. So we adjusted our service model and we were growing that revenue, that ability to deliver service month by month, both in the budget and then operationally. So in October, we were able to get back to 82% of that therapy revenue. And then you can see in the bottom right in December, we got back to 89% of that budgeted therapy. So really a testament to the management and leaders and our therapists' ability to be flexible, be agile, and pivot the delivery methods from teletherapy and in person, and balance that to deliver a tremendous amount of our pre-pandemic service levels and make those small adjustments each month to continue that progress. So, I'm pleased to tell you that as we're having this meeting at the end of January, we are on our budget, that we are having strong performance, and we've been able to do that with your help and by taking advantage of all of the different tools that have been made available over the last year. But it really starts with your support, so thank you for that. This next slide really talks about one of those tools that is a function of the pandemic. So the CARES Act is one of those funding tools. The reason why we wanted to kind of bring this slide up is to show a couple things. One is the effectiveness that the management team has had in using these tools that are brand new. And so what you see here is a quick list of Easterseals affiliates around the country who qualified for CARES Act funding, the amount of funding that they got, and how that funding size is relevant to the size of their operation. And the standout here is that Easterseals DuPage, based on our size, annual revenue just over $8 million, far exceeded the funding percentage and was really successful in securing this additional funding to support the work that we do. So really a testament to this team's understanding, use, and preparation of all the levers.
And there's also been funding available to us at the state level, including the child care restoration grants. And we have received more than $84,000 so far. We are home, as I think everybody knows, to the Lily Garden Child Care Center, the only inclusive child care center in DuPage County. And this is another arm of our organization that has been greatly impacted by the pandemic. Typically, we are full at 60 with a waiting list, but at this time, Lily Garden enrollment is stagnant because of COVID requirements and state restrictions, and the choice of some families to keep their children at home. However, we've been able to maintain this program and our staff with the help of the Child Restoration Grant. The funding has been tremendously helpful. It was restricted, though, to the gap of having it was restricted to the gap of having to reopen with lower numbers and increased safety measures. So all of that was really helpful. However, it did not cover the shortfall when we actually had to close from March through July. Um, but without this funding, we would not have been able to reopen the daycare center. And so we've been very pleased by the support from the state for the child restoration grants.
So let's talk about the kind of biggest life raft, that the center, Easterseals, has experienced since the pandemic, and that's been the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Plan, which currently is on version 2.0. So the reason why we want to talk about these different funding sources is we think it's important as major donors and supporters of Easterseals that you know that we are using all the tools available to support the great work that Easterseals is doing, is going to continue to do. So we were very successful in round one of the PPP, putting in our application, qualifying, and getting a $1.3 million PPP loan. That loan was critical for us to preserve the ability to keep our staff, maintain operations during that first phase of the pandemic. That money has been spent through payroll, through services, through expenses, and that loan has been forgiven. Recently, they announced the PPP 2.0 that had some changes in the qualifications. Those changes, Easterseals still qualified, so we were able to work with our banking partner and through Teresa and management team's leadership with our CFO. Our application was completed and has been submitted, and we're waiting to hear about that funding opportunity as we go forward. We are very optimistic based on the qualifications and based on our experience in round one, and the initial feedback is we think that our application will be successful.
Thanks, Craig. We also, additionally, many of our public and private funders have been incredibly responsive during the pandemic. We have sought out and applied for any and all relief funding that was available from both new and existing foundation partners, and we've seen a really hefty increase in this area. Many have given very generously to support our teletherapy program, as well as technology upgrades, our family services, and also to support our PPE needs at this time. So it's been a very huge positive. We started the fiscal year in September with a lot of uncertainty around our usual fundraising activities, and that hasn't gone away. But our individual donors, including all of you, have supported our campaigns in ways that we truly never even could have expected. So it has been so comforting and encouraging to see how loyal everyone has been to our cause. And this was particularly true and most recently reflected in the success of our holiday campaign and our Giving Tuesday effort most recently. This success doesn't come without challenges, because we recognize that many of these COVID relief grants and contributions are that were spurred by the pandemic are one-time gifts that will not be repeated, even though the impact of the pandemic is going to follow us into next fiscal year. So it's likely that many of the health and safety measures we've adopted will continue, but without the emergency funding that has helped us so much this year. So while there is uncertainty in the great unknown of the future, we absolutely would not be where we are today without you. And I just wanted to pause here to acknowledge that every single one of you on this call has shown up for us in so many ways, long before the pandemic, but also through the pandemic. Being in this meeting even just demonstrates your investment in Easterseals and how we're faring and the work we're doing and the kids we're serving. So it means so much, and just wanted to thank you. And I know that Craig and Teresa and Maureen and the rest of the board staff and families all join me in that appreciation. But thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, on behalf of the board, I want to reiterate, our thanks for your support, for your engagement with Easterseals, throughout both this crisis and years prior. I also want to take a moment to just kind of reflect on, what you should expect from the board of directors. This pandemic has really proven that flexibility of our leadership model, our therapists, the people who work with our clients, as well as the people who support Easterseals. So we've maintained all of our board meetings. We went to the virtual environment just like we're doing now. Our engagement with board members has never been higher. We had 100% participation for every board member in our Giving Tuesday campaign, both by making their networks available, donating money, being part of our marketing process. And so, that effort to engage the board on our mission across, all of these, levers has really proven to be beneficial, over this last year.
Yeah, and I would just, echo what Craig said about the board. It's been really impressive to see the leadership and support, and then the support of all of our donors and all of you. There are tough times. We're all going through sort of those highs and lows, and just to know that we have the generous support of our donors, our volunteers, and our board has really made the staff motivated and keeps us going so that we can provide the services to the families that we serve. So it's been it's been really inspiring actually to see all the support that we've been given.
So many of you know that we also host a series of very long running events that drive a lot of our development revenue. We've now completed an entire year cycle of virtual events that thankfully have been well received. But as we look to the rest of 2021, we know that our annual benefit gala is our biggest concern and area of focus. This event alone makes up 37% of our gross development budget for the year. So it's significant and it's important. And while we did decrease the goal for this event back in the fall when we were doing the budget, we also didn't expect to be so fully submerged in the pandemic still at this point. So we also had made the decision to push our March date to May with the hope that we'd be back to in-person events by then. And we all know that is just not possible. So we've weighed feedback from our board and committee and sponsors, and we'll be planning for a fully virtual event this spring. So while this isn't our first virtual gala, last year's event transitioned virtually just a week before the March 21st event date, right when things were shutting down. So we actually had the good fortune of most of the event support already being committed and those donors sticking with us, and we're able to really come in at very close to our usual goal. So this year, we know that building a virtual gala from scratch is going to be a whole new experience, especially finding ways to engage our donors and our sponsors. Being almost a year into the pandemic, we know the novelty of virtual events has waned, and we're very aware of that. So we are working hard to find creative ways to create a fun, energetic, mission-filled night that we know our donors have come to know and love and expect of us, and that they're going to want to support. We also know that many of our most popular auction items, the sports tickets, the concert tickets, the international travel, are likely off the table this year. So we're really strategizing how we're going to get to that $382,000 goal. But that said, our donors do continue to show up for us, and we know that they're ready and willing to help. So we are eager to put our plans in action and bring a great virtual gala to you on May 1st. So stay tuned.
And back in FY19, we received a grant to do a culture survey of the staff. And it was using an outside facilitator for this project. And we debated about whether to delay till after the pandemic. But when we recognized that the pandemic was not going to be ending soon, we decided what's a better time than during a middle of a pandemic than to determine how the staff are feeling about the organization. So we went ahead with it. Um, and the target response rate for a project like this was about 70%, and we had 82% participation. So we received a lot of feedback from the staff. One question was, what are the 3 words that you would use to describe Easterseals DuPage and Fox Valley, which are reflected in this cloud, this word cloud? And words like person-centered, family, home, collaborative, mentorship really define what we are all about and what our vision and goals are. And we were glad that these feelings were um, expressed by our staff during the pandemic, that they still felt these things were critically important and explained who we were. We scored better than the benchmark. So this format is used by a variety of different businesses, from nonprofits to for profits, and we scored better than the benchmark set for all of those organizations in articulation of mission, customer service focus, and then our organization operating culture is described as supportive, constructive, open, friendly, cooperative, and sensitive to the needs of the group. So we were really pleased by that. We also welcomed some constructive feedback, which the staff was more than willing to give us. And areas of concerns were job security, stress, and role clarity. And while these certainly are linked to the pandemic and could be excused as related to the pandemic solely, we also know that they need to be resolved now and are also important to address in the future. So we are formulating next steps and developing an action plan to address areas and involve our team in further strengthening the organizational culture. So what this whole project was about was to define what your ideal culture is, and then look at and evaluate what your current culture is, and then compare the two, and then find out where you need to focus your goals and energy. And so it was a really positive experience, and we were pleased with how we rated, but we also have some areas we know now that we can work on for some improvement. One of the things we're very excited about, 5% of our staff have received at least one vaccination. And this week and next week, many of our staff are actually going to be getting their second vaccination. And this number might be off just slightly, because I know there were a couple of people that received their vaccination in the last couple of days. So we're really pleased with that. We have had only 4 cases, as I've said earlier, of COVID, and we've had no spread. And that speaks to the health and safety measures that we sometimes get questioned about and people get tired of, but they're really working, and so they're important to us. And as I think a few of us were talking at the beginning of the call, caregivers of people with disabilities are also now eligible for the vaccine. And so we've been communicating that out to our clients and families. And we're hoping that we're beginning to see a trend where at least older clients are going to be able to start to get their vaccinations as well. One of the things that we have really tried to do during the pandemic is certainly focus our effort on the pandemic, but also look to where are we going and where are we going to be when the pandemic's over. I think early on, we thought this would be a couple weeks, maybe a month. And so that our focus was absolutely everything about the pandemic, getting our priorities in place, getting our health and safety measures in place. Well, once we realized it was going to be 3 months, 6 months, now heading into a year and probably another solid year ahead of us before we're back to any sort of normalcy, what do we want to be and what can we work on now to prepare ourselves for that day? And so I'm going to turn it over to Maureen to talk about some of the things we're doing clinically to prepare ourselves for the future.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. Yeah, as Teresa said, we are definitely working very hard to provide our services in the safest way possible. And that takes up a lot of our energy, but at the same time, we're also, we are Easterseals. We've always been thinking about the future, and so we're still doing that at the same time. One area that we are really putting a lot of energy into is expanding our mental health services. We received a grant restricted to family support. And so we're using that grant to really assess what the needs in the community are and to really be thoughtful about how we expand these services. We just know that there is an increased need in the community for these types of services, and we want to be able to meet that need. The other thing that we are doing across the agency with all therapists is we are all participating in a training. Anyone that knows anything about therapy knows that we love acronyms, so this will be the first one that I talk about. But so we'll be participating in something called FAN training, and it's facilitated attuned interactions. And this is training that will be provided to us from the Erickson Institute downtown. And the idea is that this is a training for therapists that will equip them with the capacity to collaborate in a very in a very 50-50 manner and to attune to families' emotions within their sessions. And this is an area that therapists don't typically get much training in college around, but this is something that's very, very important in our work. So we're very excited about that. We are making some improvements to our physical space in our therapy rooms. We received a capital grant from the state of Illinois, and we're reconfiguring some of our therapy rooms to make them more efficient, more storage, kinds of things. We're also building out some more social areas and multidisciplinary areas, which will be really exciting. And the idea is that at some point when kids can be in the same room getting therapy together, you might have one child getting speech therapy, another one getting physical therapy, but they're on a slide, they're on a swing, they're playing together. So we want it to be more social in nature while doing therapy at the same time. So we continue to be leaders in our training and taking training and offering trainings in the different therapy techniques. One recent development is training for therapists in something called DIR, and that's developmental individualized relationship-based therapy. And that is a training that's really focused on people with autism spectrum disorders, and it's intensive training for the therapists, and it offers them a very comprehensive view of assessing and treating these clients for us. So we just had 4 therapists go through this 14-month training, and they just finished. So that is very exciting. And then in terms of our neurodevelopmental treatment techniques, that is a training that we have, I think, 5 therapists in process right now. And this also a very intensive training, and that is a treatment techniques that are specific for people with neurologic impairments, such as cerebral palsy. Another recent training and treatment techniques that we're focused on is pediatric pelvic floor treatment. And we've had 4 physical therapists go through that training. And that is to assist pediatric clients with bowel and bladder control. And that's definitely something that we would use in practice for children with neurologic involvement, such as cerebral palsy. One other thing that we have done more recently is we're rolling out a new model of therapy. It doesn't change anything about the therapy, but we're using a more focused approach with our therapy. So we're calling it the focused care model, and it's considered best practice. We're using shorter increments for our treatment plans of 12 weeks, and this would include a discussion with the client or the family in reviewing the goals, reviewing the progress, making changes. It really gives the whole team the ability to reevaluate and make changes on a routine basis. And so it's considered best practice, and therapists are excited to roll it out, and it'll be a very good thing for families, clients, and for the therapists. We do have research partnerships that we are continuing, and one is with Lurie's Children's Hospital, the other is pathways.org and Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. Both of these research partnerships have to do with really looking at early identification of muscle differences, muscle movement differences in children. And we're talking about babies at very early ages, 3 months and 4 months. So it's looking at those very qualitative measures, and in babies, early identification, and then early intervention immediately following. As you can see, we're still busy on the future, even though we're still concentrating on where we are right now, for sure.
And then as a healthcare provider with growing reliance on teletherapy, we are obviously particularly sensitive to growing concerns around cyber security and cloud. And so we've been doing a lot of moving to cloud-based platforms. And we were fortunate enough to receive several grants that enabled us to purchase a new technology, new equipment for computers, web cameras, wireless microphones, and things like that are being used by the therapist. We probably replaced, or will by the end of February, we'll have replaced about 2/3 of our computers. And with our heavy reliance on computers and technology these days, our 10-year-old computers were not really holding up. So we were lucky that we were able to get these grants to pay for that. And so it's been a real asset to the organization, but we have to be real sensitive too to the fact that cybersecurity is an important part of our technology needs. So with that, well, really, this is kind of the fun part where we open it up to questions and comments or any further information you want on any of the different topics. We really appreciate you attending, and would love to just spend a few minutes chatting and answering any questions you might have. And